Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. I'm your host, Jackie. Today I'll be speaking with Simone, who had a unique upbringing, has struggled with substance abuse, and now lives in recovery with her partner, living a meaningful life. Hope you enjoy. Hi, Simone, and thank you so much for coming on to the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for asking. Means a lot.
It's a joy to have you here, and I've done a brief introduction to you, but do you want to just share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you do?
Sure, yeah. I guess I could just start from the beginning. I was born in the 70s in Victoria, and then went to Kelowna, and we traveled around a lot, lived in a lot of different places, and I did that. I pretty much lived by the seat of my pants up until my mid-30s, and then I got married and had kids, and my kids are 12 and 14 right now, and yeah, 2 years ago we moved to Cranbrook. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of where I am now, in Cranbrook.
In Cranbrook, BC.
Yeah.
I love it. Here with me.
Yeah, here with you.
Love it.
It's awesome.
When you say you jumped around kind of a lot when you were in your younger years, up until you're around 30 or whatever, is there a reason for that in your youth?
Yeah, so we, my parents had broken up when I was quite young, about 4 or 5, and so single mom, 3 kids, we just ended up moving from place to place. Like, we lived in Alberta for a while, in Vancouver, the coast for a while, and then it never really worked out, so then we moved back, and I moved out at like 15, and by the time I was 18, I lived in Japan and California, and just had traveled.
You were used to the jumping around.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Do you think you did it then because it was like what was most comfortable to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I can back that a little bit with when, like, right from really young, I'm a bit of an empath, and I've always been very, very sensitive to people's feelings and things going on around me, and would get into the flow of what felt right for me. And because my parents had separated and my mom was not around much, it was survival. And, it was, I mean, it was constantly tripping over different traumas and brilliant, beautiful life at the same time, like finding and living in the magic and finding the beauty in the moments, and also living through some pretty horrendous things. So, my mom was on welfare at the time, and she would get into these relationships, and we wouldn't see her for months. And like in grade 4, I used to have to steal to eat. So it was just sort of, but also with not really having guidance or parents or things around, I also got to create this really imaginative, beautiful world in it. So, as things kind of came along, it was pretty much, her leaving a boyfriend and us escaping, or her deciding to go to school and ending up on the coast, or it was just whatever it was. I don't know. So it kind of started like that, and
maybe I'll just ask you.
Sure.
Like that's already like a lot of
stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And
Yeah.
On the podcast, I would ask someone, when you think of the phrase "hold on to your heart," what do you think of? And what do you think of?
Well, when you first approached me, the first thing that came to my mind was this thing I had heard once that was, not only do I want to have God in my heart, but I also want to live in the heart of God. And I feel like, and then I was like, oh, maybe that's not quite resonating with what we're doing. And then I was trying to think of where in my life I had to hold on to my heart and where I had to do that. And I feel like right from the get-go, like it was a constant state of holding on to survival, and and so between like almost any trauma that you could think of had happened through my childhood or through my teen years, but as I got older, there's different things that sort of have come up for that. And I was contemplating that a little bit for the last couple of days of where were those parts. And I'm going to try not to jump around too much. So
why don't you maybe share a time that you had to hold on to your heart? And what I heard was that it's times of survival for you.
Yeah.
So do you want to share a time where you have been in survival and holding on to your heart?
Well, there's a couple that were quite significant. But I think, I had one relationship that when it had ended, and I was laying there, and it was one of those like deep, crazy sobs of just like, can't believe this is ending, and I was crying and crying and crying, and my heart was so broken, but what had happened in that moment is it actually broke past, and I realized that the pain of all that I was feeling was actually because I loved this human so much. And so it was the hardest, like just ripping of the heart, but I also stayed in the pain long enough to go to the other side of that and be like, wow, I'm hurting like this because I love this much. And so I got to have a beautiful clarity on the pain of that, So for that was, it's hard for me to think of times that during survival that I was holding onto my heart, because I've always been really connected to my angels or my higher power, and I've been very blessed to be guided in my life. Even like I have been co-creating my own existence for as long as I could remember, at one point, which led me to, I had a full nervous breakdown at one point at work, and that really, there was a few things that led up to it. It was around 2011, just after the Fukushima, Japan thing, and as an empath, seeing the videos and just feeling, the pain of things going on. But there was a lot of things happening in the corporation that I was, the branch that I was managing, and just a lot of changes and stuff. And one day at work, I had a 2-year-old, I was a couple months pregnant, and I had this branch evaluation thing, and just the way that it was happening to me, I actually just hit the ground and totally almost catatonic. My brain broke, like it actually felt like it broke. And that's the last day I've actually worked 12 years ago. I haven't worked since then, and I'm still recovering from that.
What does it feel like when your brain breaks? Like, what is that experience like?
The best way that I could describe it would be like watching Channel Zero. And we watch. And, yeah. So, yeah, it's just, there was like nothing. It was, I had grown into this independent, strong, taking care of myself woman that even when a few years earlier, when I had come off of a drug addiction, I was like, hey man, I know the person I'm going back to and I really like her. So there was no fear in getting off hard drugs because I loved who I was, right? So that was okay. But when it broke, it was like everything in me fractured. And like I said, I'm still recovering from that. That's still, it's been 12 years, I'm still a work in progress with that.
And that you kind of attribute more to being empathetic and taking on maybe more than you could maybe as a human handle, like in a way of like your outside external experiences? Or do you think there was more in that 2011 kind of breakdown?
There was a lot. There was a lot hitting on all of it. My husband at the time was, you know, we'd met long before, but when he came into, how much of that story do I want to get into? He spent the first months getting sober and cleaning up his life while I was pregnant and working. And then when I had gone back to work after we had gotten married and all that, there was a lot of changes that had happened in the company. And, you know, I think where it started really shifting for me was becoming a mom, you know, because I had lived completely in the moment and completely, just my own life. And then all of a sudden I had a husband, which I'd never, you know, I'd had a couple significant relationships, but not like as a husband. It's different. As like the father of my children. So I had to put him in a different box, right? And, you know, there's things that happened in those relationships that even for a second in any of my past relationships, if someone would have talked to me like that or said that to me, I'd be like, you're out. Like, that's a no-go. But I was like, oh, you know, he's in recovery. He's really trying hard. And he's working on himself. And he always was. He's always been doing that. But he came from a really colorful background. So, you know, the man he is today is amazing. But it was a lot of work to get here. Like, a lot. And, you know, and so having the patience and tolerance, trying to find my own voice, and then there's a baby, and then we're trying to merge families, and, you know, at the time I'm managing this company, and it just, you know, all of it was hitting the fan. And the company that I was with, we used to be like a family-run business, like quite a large one all through Western Canada, but it was getting so big that it was switching to corporate, and I didn't have a lot of support. And so there was a lot of things that were happening within that were, I just couldn't keep up, you know, pregnant and baby. And we had our daycare place. We had to like, I would take her to daycare at 6:30 in the morning, and then I'd pick her up at 6 at night, drive back into Vancouver. And that was all I saw her for like that whole year that I was back. And I'm like, you know, and I'd get home and then I'd try to make dinner and try to cuddle her and go to bed, and, you know, and things going on in my relationship. And then, you know, we were in a car accident that month as well. Like it was just like everything that could hit, you know, and then what was happening during my evaluation at work, it was just this, when she just kept coming at me with this stuff, and it just ticked me right off the edge. And so fractured just, and I didn't know how to pick up after that. I didn't know, like I would just lay there holding my oldest and just be broken, you know, like it was pretty challenging.
Would you kind of consider that then like an emotional kind of rock bottom where you had to kind of pick up the pieces? Is that kind of what that signifies, that year of just like everything kind of hitting the fan, all this transition and newness, all these things that you've started to build, and then just like realizing like things needed to change in order to kind of progress with them and continue on?
Well, it's funny because there's the first few years out of that, there's actually just a lot of fuzz, because it viscerally, it completely in my brain, everything, like it broke, and I had completely lost my identity. Like, who am I in all this? What am I doing? Where am I going? I can't function the way I used to. I have this memory of this woman that I am, and there's, you know, I'm looking and I'm like, things are changing and different all the time, you know? And so it was to try to sort through, and, you know, Paul, I'll try not to say his name, but he was like even his sense of humor is very different than mine. He's really sarcastic and, which is typically quite funny unless you're broken, then it feels like abuse, right? And I know that was never his intention ever, but it broke me to the point of, we actually ended up leaving Vancouver and going to Squamish. And when we were in Squamish, like I spent a good portion of that suicidal. Like, I'm like, I can't even, my kids, there was nothing that could hold me together. And I was 5 years sober, and I had to learn how to compartmentalize, like take his voice and take it out of my head. And knowing the woman I was, I couldn't believe that I would let myself be in this position of even letting this stuff affect me. And so then that also made me feel more broken, like, made me feel like I am being a victim, right? Which is one of those things, victims.
I don't hear that.
They give me a knee jerk. But I found myself falling into the role, the feelings of that. And, and then I had a friend point out to me, he's like, well, you can't blame him for the actions that I'm doing. And I agree with that, but it's hard when every time you're coming up for water or for air, that someone steps on your head, you're being drowned. And like I said, it would never, ever was an intention. It's just, he hadn't done his work at that time. And so it just, the way it pulled off, it broke me more. And so the healing was always that much harder. So in Squamish, I went back to, a support group that I felt like I just had to start reaching out, and I got really into that group in that area, and continued like just doing a lot of work on myself, and just doing just picking up the pieces where I could, like, trying to source joy where I could, trying to find the spots that would bring some clarity to what I was going through and how I was feeling. And I found like working with other people is what brought me back to what I've been able to salvage from the shipwreck of my sense, what resonates with me in the sense of what do I feel like is my purpose in life, right? And what it kind of always brought me back to being, I always kind of felt like I was here when I was young, I was like, I'm here to save the world, right? And then someone said to me, they're like, why do you think the world needs saving, and why do you think that would be by you? And I was like, yeah, like, who the hell do I think I am? Like, what? And so it shifted to, where can I be of service to people, and so that sort of took on the new tone of, I felt like if I was able to, when I'm helping people, when I'm serving people, when I'm bringing joy or easing burdens, I feel better, like it does something for me. And so that put me back on track to what I've been doing my whole life, but kind of started sliding it in. And then there's the balance of, okay, it can't ever be what it was before, but how do I balance that with, kids and sports and school and husband and new towns and new this and new that, and, and then the other family and the rest of the stuff.
When you say it can't be back to where it was before, kind of referring to like pre-2011 and... Yeah.
And I mean, truly, my kids are the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, and they're amazing. But before kids, if I felt like I felt like I wanted a change in my life, and so I moved to Japan, and 3 days later, or, I was living in Whistler, and my girlfriend and I were sitting there talking, we're like, we want to leave. We drove down to San Francisco and moved there and lived there for a while. Like, I live in the moment of where my heart takes me, but you can't do that when you have kids at home. You can't live like that. And even before I had kids, when I work, like, I'm a workaholic. Like, I put everything in, whether it's, through recovery groups or this or that. Like, I almost don't really have an off switch, because it's just, even if I'm painting my house, like, I get in, I do it, I'm all in. And when I'm all in, unless someone is with me, helping me along with me, they kind of get left in the dirt. Like, and it's never meant intentionally. Like, I'm driven to to do these things. I want to create beauty. I want to bring joy. I want to feel good and make other people feel good. And I will follow that and run with that. But it also doesn't really work in the normal bits of society or to have a normal family. Like I would pick up the kids and move to Mexico or Costa Rica or like tomorrow, just because I would want that experience for them, or like the south of France, or, you know, if I could have it my way, we would do whatever. But, you know, you have to make concessions when you're in a relationship and you have kids. So, you know, so that's
yeah, the way it is.
Yeah.
You're learning to live with that.
Yeah.
And how does it feel then in that kind of space of realizing that maybe, is it a grief or is it like, hey, like,
well, how I put in my mind is I'm taking this opportunity to still work on myself. I'm still not, I'm still growing back to the place that I was. I'm still connecting to my heart and my, you know, my intuition of what I want to be doing and how I want to portray that. And so because that's always evolving, you know, it's not quite clear. I'm still sort of waiting, and a big part of that is because I don't plan on doing anything extreme or crazy or out there or whatever, and until my kids have kind of, you know, they've got a few more years of school left, and you know, and I'm pretty sure my husband will be all over whatever we're doing, but yeah, so I can't really make those things, but in the meantime, there's a lot of stuff I can be doing, like working with others. I do that as much as possible. And, you know, one of the things I go on is like, you know, you talked about grief, like, life is suffering. It is suffering. And for me, I can't help people feel better, but I can help people try to get better at feeling, right? So, you know, help them navigate the things that go on, because I feel like through different stuff that I've done with people I've worked with, the more sort of wreckage of the past that I can heal or we can heal, then if something happens, like your best friend dies, right, which is heart-stopping, shattering, life-shattering, then I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with the grief. It's not touching on wounds of my past. It's not bringing up all of the many besties I've had that have passed. Like, I mean, yeah, if I go back, there's so, like, you know what, people die, it's sad, and life is life on life's terms, right? So I want to be able to meet life and deal with the grief and deal with the pain and deal with the transitions and my house burning down, or my, you know, whatever things happen in the moment as they happen, you know, carrying the burdens of the past. Like that's where I think I and other people will get caught up in, you know, something will happen, it'll trigger that pain of something that happened in the past, and it takes us down that much harder and that much faster. And so it's only by learning how to live like in the moment, can we deal with those things, you know?
Well, yeah, I'm just like, wow, yeah, because I mean, that is just the case, right? Like, it's everything that hurts me today almost masks itself, you know, but as it's something that hurt me in the past, right? It is just, I'm triggered. I'm challenged, and that old stuff's coming up and it wants to be healed. And I think that's what you're saying, right? Is work with what's truly happening in that moment. And, you know, where I think it's a lot easier to try to blame or, you know, not clean up the wreckage and to just kind of carry on, because the work is scary.
Yeah.
Right?
It can be.
Yeah.
It can also be very enlightening, right? You know, and I agree. And I feel like for myself, I know that I've healed something when I can think back on it and I don't have an emotional reaction to it. I can like be detached from, it's not saying it's okay that these things happened or I was, you know, hurt in these many ways. It's that they don't carry the weight anymore. And going into like other relationships, I'm not carrying those, you know, those same inhibitions and those same things that stop me from being who I can be in the moment, right? So that's how I know when I've healed through them.
Do you want to share some of the things that you have healed through, where like you're now able to show up and be present in the moments?
Sure. I mean, there's, I think the easy one to just throw out there, because I think a lot of people can relate to it, is just like molestations or rapes, like from the time I was 5, right? Many different people, many different situations. So those type of things, you know, a lot of people, I mean, it's derailing. It's derailing to feel so betrayed and to feel so ashamed, and then to think that you're bad. And then what if one of them wasn't even like a horrible situation, and then you feel guilty for being okay that it was, you know, you're like 15 and there's like an 80-year-old guy or whatever, but you like the guy even though he was 80 or something, you know, but then you feel dirty. And so
is this your experience?
Or yeah, I was exaggerating. I mean, okay, so I was like 17 and he was in his 60s and he was super hot. But it, you know, I was 16 or 17. I know.
There's no
he's not dead yet. He could probably get in a lot of trouble with that kid out there. I don't know, maybe you want to edit that. But he was one of my best friends. It was one of my first jobs, and I loved this guy, and it was just so sick. But I came from such a sick place that was love and sex, and was it the same? And you know, and I didn't actually. It wasn't until a couple people a few years ago came out that they took advantage of people, where I thought, you know what, that wasn't right. Like, a 60-year-old man should not be having sex with a 17-year-old girl. And I didn't even get how wrong that was until I saw other people's, you know, experience, and they're like, no, like, someone that young isn't capable of making a choice, you know, like that. Or why was I even in a position that choice was an option? You know, like, I started working in a nightclub when I was 14. So, and I worked there for 7 years. So, why was I allowed to work in a nightclub at 14? You know, but things were different in the 90s, right? Like, everyone drank, or it was just everything is, you know, people are becoming more and more aware of what's right and what's wrong. And I mean, obviously that stuff was wrong, but at the time, it was, you know, and because I think that for me, I had so many different weird situations like that happen, that you question, is it me? Like, did I ask for this? Did I entice this? Was it because I was too friendly, you know? And so, you know, I remember at my sister's wedding, I was like 19, and I went up to my uncle who had molested me when I was younger, and I was like, you know what? I totally forgive you, because you're fucking sick and it has nothing to do with me, and I will never allow you to have power over my life again. And it was gone. It was gone. Like that, you know, that power that I had given this person. I let this sick person affect how I was in my relationships, and I refuse to give that person any more power. I want my power back.
So when you share that, you know, like, that kind of molestation and abuse was impacting your relationships in a way, and you had to go to that person and confront them and say that they weren't going to have that power over you anymore.
Yeah.
Do you want to kind of share what it looked like when it was coming up in your life? And
well, you know, the very first time I lost my virginity, I remember I was, whatever, and it was both of our first time. And I just remember when I left his house, I was like, okay, I'm like, I love you. And he's like, yeah, okay, I love you too. And it was like, I was like, because I think this is what people are supposed to do when they love. I think they're supposed to do this. Like, I think this is what we're supposed to do. So I didn't have any healthy relationships around me to base off of. So if I was intimate with someone, like is it because I wanted to, or was it because I wanted them to like me? Like it wasn't really sacred. It didn't, until I kind of had gotten older, where I kind of went, no, this vessel is sacred. I will honor anything I put in it, wherever I put it, like in any orifice. I want to honor this vessel, but there was a lot of dishonoring until that happened, and just trying to figure out, what is love? How important is sex? Is it just something you do with someone, or does it need to be sacred? Or, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Just kind of marked with a lot of confusion from probably a past and your parents not being together, and I guess probably not having a lot of role models. And like you said, your mom, she would leave at periods of times with men, and probably, you shut everything out and you just focus on that person in front of you and do whatever it takes, kind of thing. Is that like a theme of it?
Yeah. Because I think, there was the three categories of, there was the men you never ever want to sleep with because you love them so much that you want to have them in your life. Mm-hmm. And then there's the ones that you would just sleep with because you want to. And then there was the guys that you really wanted a relationship. You really wanted them to love you. And so when I would meet men out and about or whatever, it was like I ended up not sleeping with as many men as I could have because I have these deep loving relationship with a lot of wonderful men, and just really good friendships. And the hard thing about once you cross that line with someone is that I ended up doing that a few times when I was younger, and I'm still friends with some of those friends too. But when you end up sleeping with someone, you kind of can't come over to Thanksgiving dinner if he's got a new wife, mm-hmm. because you're that girl.
You're on the X list.
Yeah, but if you never slept together, you can be in each other's life forever, and it's safe or whatever, mm-hmm. right? So, I think a lot of times people have, especially like jealousy and stuff like that about, well, this person was with that person, maybe they want to go back there, maybe blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of blessed. I'd never really had jealousy as an issue for me. Like my whole thing was like, if you think you can find something better, then do us both a favor and get lost. Like, I don't really care. I'll find something else. Like, please go be happy, So.
It's refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't, and I feel that with most of anything in my life. Like I hope I'm being honest, because I can't think of anything right now, but I don't really have anything that I have jealousy or envy over, materially or people-wise, anything,
Did you ever have it, or did you just never never was a thing for you?
It was never a thing.
Well, you had enough, so I'm glad that you got away with that. I'm sure you had enough stuff to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because like I said, I grew up with nothing, and I think what sort of carried me through is that I always felt grateful for having anything, and even when I said I'm a co-creator, and I'll be like, I always get what I want, like I get whatever I want. But what I always wanted was, such bare minimum. I'm so grateful with anything, that I don't really, I can live on nothing. Even when I was living in my car, I was like, hey man, I'm living in my car. Like,
4 rubber wheels.
yeah, I got a car. Like,
And when were you living in your car?
when was that? So much of it is jumbled. That would have been, let's see, I think I first, so my kidneys and liver shut down. I was in the hospital for coming off amphetamines.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that was a weekend in the life of, I don't know. But, and so my dad had to was passing through town, and he had seen me and brought me up to the Okanagan from living in, I was in Vancouver at the time. And it took me about 5 years to really get recovery. Like, he moved me into his house, and
How old were you, roughly?
22, 24.
Yeah.
24. And yeah, so I was seeing a counselor at the time, and it's funny because I was seeing this counselor for months, and I was working in this bar, and I was just drinking Baileys and coffee in the morning and stuff. And every time I'd see her, she's like, you should think about not drinking. And I was like, it's just Baileys and coffee and a beer here and there. It's not like I'm doing meth, like, And it wasn't until I went to treatment, like I went to, this place in Vancouver, and they were like, 0 tolerance for alcohol or whatever. And I was like, what? So when she meant like don't drink, she meant like don't drink. And I didn't even get it, but I think my brain was still unfreezing, right? So when I went back to her, I was like, oh, you actually meant like just don't drink anything. So I didn't even get it. So it took me a while, and so I had relapsed a couple times. And so when I was living in the Okanagan, and it was during that time that at one point I was kind of living in my car, I'd burnt all my bridges. It actually was a really great thing. At the point just before I had really stopped, everyone had just accepted that I was a junkie, because this was what I was doing, and I was, doing these heavy drugs, and I'm like, I believe it has a shelf life. I know who I am. When I get out of this, I'm going to be fine. This is where I am right now, and you got to accept me for where I am, and like just righteous little brat, right? Mm-hmm. And so when everyone sort of just accepted me for being that way, that's kind of where I was like, hey, maybe I don't want this for my life, And then so I had spent a few days trying to overdose. I would just do so much drugs trying to overdose. And then I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, it didn't work. And I did this for a couple days in a row. I was at nighttime trying to like kill myself through the night. And by like the third night, I just was like, I'm so sick of this. I don't even want to die anymore. I don't even want to die. Like, it was so bizarre to get on the side of like, I don't even want to die. I'm done. I'm just done. And so I detoxed in that room by myself. I'd fall asleep in a contorted position and wake up 11 hours later in the same position, having like gone to the bathroom, like just, it took it was, nasty. I can't believe I didn't die actually, but I guess the universe had other plans.
Were you alone for this detox?
Pretty much. There was someone at the place, but they were done with me, so it was like, yeah. So, yeah, it took a couple days to be able to, like, I'd wake up in these positions and I'd have to like move my hand down, like it was really bizarre actually.
Everything just feels like 100 pounds probably, and just like,
yeah, and
seized.
Yeah, and just like, I call these things these brain melts, because it was like all of a sudden your brain would melt and you get these like electric zaps, and it was, and that went on for a long time, because I remember when I had gotten a year clean after that, this would have been around 2004, I remember thinking, wow, I can't believe how messed up I was, and I was so still methy, that a lot of people were like, are you sure you're not using it? I'm like, no, man, like I actually got it this time. And then at my second year, I remember looking back and being like, wow, was I ever a wreck last year, you know? And then by the third year that I had been sober, I was like, oh my gosh, like even at 2 years, like for coming off of really hard drugs, you know, it takes a while, you know? And I think because it had taken me a few years to sort of get to my breaking point where I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to these different recovery groups and I'm going to just do what they actually say. I'd been there off and on before, but I'm like, I'm going to give it a year and just see. I'm just going to see if this works. Worst case scenario, I can take all my pain back. I can take all my life. I can go use if I want to right now. Like you can do it whenever, but I was like, just give it a year. Just give it a year, put everything in, do what they ask, do what they suggest. I have nothing to lose. Like I can't even kill myself properly. Like, so I did, and man, like life just gets so good so fast, you know, it does. And then by the time I hit that year, I was like, I would never give that back, you know. And thankfully that cleaning myself up and like doing it on my own, which, you know, I mean, if I'm someone's that heavy into it, I probably suggest going somewhere to detox. But it was so horrid that through the first many years of my being clean, it was like, I know for sure it's better to put a bullet in my head than to use again, unquestionably. Like shoot first, drugs second, that's it. Like there was nothing that would take me back there, you know? So thankfully it was that bad.
And so you've been clean and sober since?
No. So I'd been clean and sober all through that, I lived in the Okanagan for a few years, and then lived in Vancouver for a few years, and in Squamish for a few years, and in Langley for a few years. So I ended up having close to 14 years, clean and sober. And then we'd moved into my husband's family home, and we moved in there to take care of my father-in-law, who was dying of alcoholism. And so that whole thing, you know, my husband had been sober for a decade as well. You know, we were like speakers in different shows and, you know, doing all this work, and you know, everything was great. And we moved in here to take care of my father-in-law, and each step of the way, like that was such a challenging thing. Like this is the house that he had pretty much been born in and lived right through. And then, you know, he left for a few years, and then here he's back living at this house, still taking care of this person who is, there was a lot of really dysfunctional things that happened in that house. And I think it was just too much for him. So he had had a relapse, and it was short, and then like 6 weeks short. And then I was like, that's it, it's over. And then he got sober again. And when he gets, you know, he only had drank or whatever, so it wasn't that bad. So he had come back and gotten on and done all the right things. And then his dad died. He actually died in my arms. I got to actually hold him and walk him through his dying, which was beautiful. And, you know, it's quite amazing. Like I've been blessed to be able to be with a couple friends while they had babies, and I've been present with a few people while they've died, and being with someone and holding space. And with him, like it was actually a lot of the same breathing as I did with my girlfriend while she was having her baby. And it was, you know, it was so much. I don't have words. Like there was so much. I'm lacking the lexicon to pull it together. So, so that kind of shifted things again. And then he had another relapse. And I always knew I was a drug addict, but I was like, alcohol, whatever, like take it or leave it. So when he started drinking, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like, I'll just have a couple beers, drink here and there or whatever. And and it, you know, because I could have a beer and I wouldn't have three because I actually would get sick. Like it didn't, my allergy was that I'd puke, right? And so that lasted 6 weeks, and then he, his way is he gets suicidal. So after 6 weeks, he was going to do that. So instead, he got clean, but it was the second time he'd relapsed, and I'm like, you know, I can't really do this. We went and lived in a hotel for a little bit, and so he ended up deciding to get clean again, and he put everything in and was like, okay, we're doing this, we're gonna, you know, and I was like, you know what, I don't have a problem with drinking, you do. So you keep derailing our life, and I'm okay having a drink once in a while, so you do whatever you want or go, or fix it and stay. But at that point, I was like, I was drinking again. So I was like, I'm not, my life is not unmanageable in any way, and I'm not causing any harm, and I'm not doing anything, and I like to have a glass of wine here and there. And so I'm like, this is the new me. And so, you know, I was like, accept it or get lost. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because I hadn't actually developed, I hadn't progressed to alcohol being a problem at that point.
Did it get there?
It did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So after a couple years of that, maybe 2 or whatever, we had a situation happen where, how can I explain this without going too much into it? We lived in the same house, and COVID was hitting, right? And we had the coolest neighborhood in all of Langley. Like we all had acreages, all of our neighbors, we were all friends. It was during COVID, we were in the same cohort, and we'd have bonfires like every night, and it was fun. And we had quads, and it was like, COVID was fun. Like, it sounds horrible, but you know, other than the fact that the life was upside down, we were managing well. And Paul being around that, finally he broke, and I don't blame him being in that situation. Like, it was in his face every night. Everyone's doing shooters, and you know, at some point he broke, right? Which, you know, I feel responsible for. But when that happened, some of the other people in our life also had other things that they were doing. And so when that sort of came into play, I remember saying either the day of or the day before, I would shoot myself in the head before I would do drugs. There's not a chance, like, keep that shit away from me. And they're like, oh, well, he really wants to. And I was like, man, you have no idea what door you're opening. And if you open that, you're responsible. Like, I was so mad, right? That I was like, well, I can't believe you're going here. And then it got brought out, and, you know, and one of my besties who I love very much, like, was like, hey, Simone, we got one for you too. Why don't you come? And I instantly was raging mad. I was so angry that that's what we were doing. I was like, are you, after I had just said, kill me first, he's your responsibility, this is bullshit, and then all this, I was like, I just went in there and bang, back on coke. Yeah. So that, after having many, many years of being, was like, it was, you know, codependent, rage, anger, can't believe we're here, we're in a pandemic, blah, blah, like everything. And I was just like, fuck you, I'm doing this. You guys have no idea what you just opened, because I don't use drugs on weekends. I like drugs for breakfast. I like a big line for breakfast, like that. I don't know if that's too much information, but I don't do drugs here and there. I'm on drugs or I'm not on drugs. So during that time, it was all COVID. No one could drive, no one could do anything. So everything would get delivered to the house. It was only a few months. And at the first few months of living in this bonfires every night, and we had a pool, and it was, you know, it was so much fun, until it wasn't. until, you know, I'm locking myself in the closet because I'm scared of my husband, until we're having to put the kids somewhere because I don't know what's going on in the house, until it's 3 o'clock in the morning and someone's running around because they think the house is on fire and it's fucking crazy, until all this shit's going on and it's like, oh my God, you know. And it was only a couple months of crazy, and then I was like, I'm out, and that's why I came here. That's how I ended up in Cranbrook. So I had been here maybe 2 times before, and to be honest, when I came here, I was like, I don't really know why people live here. At the time, because I lived in, you know, Vancouver and Kelowna and San Francisco and Japan and like all over the world, and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, it's so small, right? Like, oh my gosh. And we went to an Arizona Suns game, the basketball team, and I was sitting in there and I'm like, man, there's more people, there's the same amount of people in this one place that there is in all of Cranbrook. I was like, oh, wow. Like, it was just such a change, right? Mm-hmm. But I was done, and I found a house I wanted to move into, and I was like, I got to get back to me, right? I got to get back to, like, what am I doing? I couldn't believe that I was in this position again, you know, and that my kids they were too young, like they were 8 and 10 or whatever it was a couple years ago, something around there, but they weren't aware enough to know what was going on. And because, like, I didn't have to take them to school, there was nothing going on, so they were too young to understand what was going on, thankfully. Mm-hmm. And thankfully it was only for a short time. But you know, I came here for a little bit, decided I was moving here. Paul was still doing his thing, and then I went back to pack up my things and I was leaving him. And then he was like, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna come with you, and we're gonna get clean and sober and blah, blah, blah. And so at first that was okay, and we were gonna buy separate houses. But slowly, when you're with someone, then it turned into us buying a house together, and, you know, and so we did, and it, you know, then we're both back here, you know, in recovery. And it's it can be really humbling and really challenging to have a significant amount of time, and having been working with a lot of people in a lot of different recovery things, and then to be like, yeah, all that I said, like, I failed, like I broke, something broke me. And so, I mean,
how do you forgive yourself for that?
Well, I don't have any, you can't have any regrets, you know, like, yeah, I mean, because I'm continually doing more work, I know that it can happen to anyone, right? It's the right circumstance, it's the right situation, and, you know, it can blindside you on some Tuesday night, just where if I'm not connected to my higher power, and I'm not, you know, being conscious, and I'm letting things around me hit me, and I'm not showing up in the way that I need to show up for myself, the chance of me falling off can happen. Like, I need to stay committed to certain things to keep my life on track. They're basic things, they're simple, but I need to show up for those things all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, it's what, you know, and, you know, you'd ask earlier if the alcohol had progressed. Yeah, by the end of it, I was like drinking a 2-6 of rum in the morning for breakfast. Like, it was like, you know, rum and Coke.
It's funny, hey, like how you build the case around what you can do, and, you know, what it, like you said, like, this is the new me, right?
Yeah.
And you just are so strong in that conviction, and know until you're ready, it doesn't matter what anybody says.
No,
I think,
it doesn't.
Right? Like, you have to be ready to want the change and stuff. And
for sure.
Yeah, and hearing what you say too, that some people, it seems, they want to get well and they want to stop using substances, but going back out and trying again is sometimes what happens, right? But it is still possible to get back on track. And
exactly.
What do you think the hardest part about, like, maybe going wanting something to be clean and sober and then kind of falling off the wagon and then having to like come back? Is it harder, do you find, the second time around, or?
That's probably a lot of people's biggest challenges. Like, and I'd kind of gone through that a bit too, of like humbling ourselves to be like, no, like this works. I've seen people come into recovery programs and they get it right away, and they've been clean and sober for a really long time, and then, but a vast majority of us have relapses and have things that come up or have things that derail us. And to me, the most important thing is, can you get back on? Mm-hmm. Whatever, like whether you have, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 20 years, get back on. I think it doesn't take away that, decade and a half that I had in recovery. Mm-hmm. I still have that. I still learned amazing things. I still carry all those tools. And I feel like, even for the first year here, I was like, I went to this thing and it was like, everyone was like, oh, how long you been sober? And I was like, not even a year ago. Like, just starting out, like, I was like, I was in the over 10 group before, and now I'm like in the under 1. And you humble yourself, right? And so I like to think of it as like, I think that it's not necessarily a disease of addiction or alcohol or whatever. It's a disease of emotions. Like, our feelings and emotions are what drive all of our actions and behaviors, right? And so until I can learn how to put those in check, but if I'm self-medicating or using mind-altering substances, I'm lost before I even get through the door. Mm-hmm. To try and heal anything.
So with all that being said, like, what would you tell someone that was going through something similar, or maybe wants to maybe not use, or maybe they've just relapsed, maybe they had a lot of time in and they're kind of feel like they have to start again?
Yeah, I would say it's never too late to start. It's never too late to make a choice. It doesn't matter where you're sitting at, whether you've been, whatever brought you to the moment that you're in right now, you have a choice. I had a friend who said to me once, he's like, no matter where you're at, Simone, he's like, just stop and breathe. If you're breathing, you have a choice. Everything's going to be okay. Mm. And so, I think, I don't know, that made me think of this one thing that's like, I was watching and this guy said, the only things you need to do in life is to try to put as healthy things in your body as you can, to breathe and to laugh. Mm. And if you can do those 3 things in your life, you don't really need much more, honestly. And if you need help, there's a ton of people and support groups and things. There's always people that want to help. Like, it's because I actually find the most benefits I get is when I'm helping other people. And I believe that when we start getting on this path and we start living in selfish and self-centeredness and start living in selflessness and being connected to our higher power and being connected to life in general and really truly living life, the bliss of moments, it is living in service of others, and whatever that looks like, that truly brings real joy. And when enough of us start hitting that, then we want to help the people. And if there's so many struggles in this world, there's so many things going on, like if you turn on the TV anywhere, there's anything, it would be enough to bring you down. And for me, I just have to sometimes stop and breathe. I inhale in, I relax, I exhale, I smile, and I try and do that as much as I can. And yeah, if you need help, there's a lot of places to reach out and help. And I try and do what I can, and I hope people do that, because you don't have to live in suffering either. That's the whole thing, It's the numbing out of the pain. It's all that stuff that we're stuffing and we're trying not to look at, and we think that by not feeling it, it's going away. It's nothing you do is going to make you feel better. but we can, help you get better at feeling, right?
I think in one of the parts in this conversation, you said, life is suffering, and then you're saying, we don't have to suffer. So basically, like,
well, I think we have
inevitable.
to suffer. Suffering is inevitable.
Yeah.
Suffering, I think life is suffering. I think, but it's our attachment to that is suffering, right? It's our craving and aversion. It's the things we want or we don't want. It's those things that cause us suffering in our life. And only when we're equanimous, when we're at standstill and balanced, are you actually in a place of neutrality and you're not going to feel suffering. Now, if you can attain Buddhahood or full enlightenment, that might happen, but likely most of the planet, including definitely myself, have a long way to go before that. And so in the meantime, there's going to be a lot of suffering. There's going to be a lot of craving and aversion, that wanting more or just wanting less. It's out of a place of neutrality, right? So, but that's not a bad thing. This planet is a learning planet. We're here to experience and learn. And just because some of those experiences that we have, I don't ever want to even label them good or bad. They were just life experiences. Even getting into recovery, I don't have regrets over any of my past. I don't have, do I think back and need to forgive myself for those things? I don't know. That's a huge, big open can of worms or whatever. But I can say that today in my life that I do love who I am. I love what I'm about. I love what I'm trying to do. I know I have a long way to go. I know there's a lot of hurdles, but I'm like, bring it on. I'm breathing today, so bring it on,
Do you think in Gateway and just kind of collecting, I know there's probably a lot more that goes into getting to that place to accept and love yourself and say, bring it on and not have a lot of regret. But do you think, I guess the first stage is, I guess, the white flag, right? The surrendering piece of I don't even want to die anymore. I just don't want to do any of this anymore. That's what I think of, right? Just okay, whatever,
Absolutely.
I am not doing this, and whatever I'm trying to do, I'm not doing a good job.
Yep.
And just kind of giving it over and then just taking that first step forward. And it sounds like for you, it's a lot about connection. It's a lot about giving service, right? Changing that mind frame from I want to save the world to I want to help a person, right? And how much real joy comes from that, right? And I think that's for anybody, right? Probably not people only who dealt with, substance abuse, but anybody. If you're in your own self and you're struggling and you have a lot of suffering, go help someone else that's suffering and you'll suffer less, right? That is I think I don't know where it all stems from, but it's just the way it is, right? And so yeah, I admire what you do in the community, and that's kind of how I do know you and the people that you help and the service that you give to the community, right? And your experience and your hope and your wisdom, and it doesn't go unnoticed on my end, so I appreciate you being on here. I feel kind of bad because we're kind of limited for time, and I know that I feel like we're just getting started. We're just scratching the surface. There'd be way more to talk about. So hopefully we can get you back on. I wonder if there's when you think about coming on the podcast, if there was something that was I want to do that because, or I have a message that I want to share. I'm not to say you haven't shared one, but what was it for you that felt compelling to come and share a piece of yourself on here?
Well, I think when I came on here, there's this one quote by this guy who I'm not going to say his name because I don't know how to say it, and it says something like, "It is no measure of one's health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society," and I feel like all what you just said too about throwing the white flag in and stuff, I finding your own source and your own truth is part of the battle. But what you said about throwing the white flag in, I think, if you're sitting on the street and you're huddled in, reach your hand out and throw it, because someone will reach back, right? But there has to be, I will go to any lengths for someone, but someone has to meet me. They have to meet me too. I can't do it for people. You can't do it for me. It does take work, but we're worth it. You're worth it. And it's worth putting that effort in, and it's brilliant and it's amazing. And there's nowhere that we have to go or fit into or do anything. It's just finding the quiet peace inside of us, the placid happiness, or, you know, and it's a journey, but man, I don't want to miss the show. I still get to sit on the front lines and watch all this, and I want to be a part of them. When you see someone and you get to experience, and especially if you get to be a part of watching the light come on in someone's eyes, it's amazing. It's truly amazing, and I feel blessed to be able to have that opportunity, and I hope other people get to experience that same thing, because it's truly remarkable. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
If there was something that I haven't really asked you a lot, I would say
I know I'm talking a lot.
No, that's perfect. That's what we like. Has there been something that you wanted to say or you thought you might say that you haven't?
Well, I wasn't really sure of the direction that we were going to go, and you know, it's kind of like what you mentioned is there's so many bits and pieces, and you could take, with any of us, you could take any different part of our lives, and you could open it, and we could write stories about, you know, and we're all having the same life experience in the same time, and you know, I'm not really sure what my message is in this mess that's going on here, right? Like, I'm just still trying to figure it out, and if anything, I would hope that something I could say could be helpful to someone. I would hope that it might give someone the courage to just, it doesn't matter how crappy your life is or what shitstorm you've done or what ways, you know, we humiliate ourselves, or we've done this shit, or we've been crazy and we think that's unforgivable, or, you know, there is nothing that is not fixable. There's nothing that's not healable, I guess. And, you know, I believe that, you know, give yourself a chance. You're worth it. And, you know, there's a lot of beauty and amazing things in the world, and you know, don't miss that bus. Get on the bus.
It's so true. Like, you cannot just have someone sit down for 1 hour and anticipate and be able to pull out the depth of a person and their story. And I feel like whatever has come up in today is what's meant to, and that's the message that needs to be shared, right? And I think just trusting that piece and knowing that that's just a part of you, and it's, you know, a part of now how I get to know you and how others may too, right? And there's things that you've said today that have definitely helped me, and I think that will be the same experience for others. And I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing bits of yourself. And do you want people to find you anywhere? Like, would you want to leave a social media handle or anything like that?
Not yet. I mean, I'm as you mentioned, I'm quite involved with a lot of different things right now. Yeah. And still trying to juggle kids, house, sports, school, all at once. I'm pretty
good.
Yeah. I mean, if someone really wants me to, then you can get a hold of her.
There you go. I know what I was going to ask you. I kind of tripped up there. Okay. And what I wanted to ask, is there something in your life right now that, like, what's the thing in your life you'd say today is the thing that you're currently kind of healing or working through, or?
Well, I'm still working on the repairing what was broken. There's a lot of the sense of who I am that I'm still placing back together. I'm not yet in a position where I feel like I could function in normal day-to-day life. I still struggle with some of those things. So that's a constant work in practice. I feel like I'm healing so much so fast all the time that it's on the horizon that I'll be up in full force again at some time in the not too distant future, but you know, there's still some things that need to align for me to you know, heal those fragmented pieces that happened a long time ago that are, you know, they don't necessarily will ever go back together, but I can, you know, merge them and learn to work within that, right?
I think that's a good message too, right? Like there's always work to be done, and
Always.
it's just like slow and steady, and it's not
Yeah.
all at once, and things don't
No.
get better overnight. I think like some of the things you're talking about are like referring back to 2011, right? Like
Yeah,
some of the
exactly.
the breakage and still picking up the pieces and creating that self and uncreating that self too at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So
And think
yeah.
about how boring life would be if nothing happened.
yeah, we need this.
At least
shit.
it gives us something to do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I definitely appreciate you coming on the podcast, Simone, and sharing bits of yourself, and hopes to ease your journey and someone else's. So thank you
Yes.
so much.
I'm honored. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Morgan. I'm the producer of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you'd like to find out more about what we're all about and check out other episodes, you can find us at holdontoyourheartproject.com or on YouTube and Instagram at Hold On to Your Heart Project. Thanks for stopping by.